this is going to be pretty cool. All right, Orion, the mighty hunter. And I pointed out how he's opposing the forward progress of the oxen. The oxen is rushing forward, but standing in his way is Orion. He's got this club and he's got the head of a lion. Okay, what's going on here, right? Let's unpack the symbolism of this and let's just use the word to identify what this is and who it is. Okay, so the Hebrew meaning. The Hebrew word for Orion is Kasil, which means, okay, yeah, we want a Hebrew definition for it. Perfect. And this constellation is specifically mentioned in the Bible, so we can go right to the Hebrew and get the meaning of what this is. So the Hebrew word for Orion is Kasil, which means the burly one, to be fat, i.e. figuratively silly, to be foolish. Burly is defined by Merriam-Webster as strong, strongly and heavily built. So now I'm going to make a comparison and I'm going to suggest, and I believe that the person here being represented as this mighty hunter and facing off against the oxen in our sign of Taurus is none other than Saul of Tarsus. And here's why. Okay, so Orion is the mighty hunter. Was Saul a hunter? Yes. Saul hunted down the Christians, making havoc of the church, entering every house and dragging off men and women, committing them to prison. So there's our first connection, Acts 8, 1-3. He's opposing, he's in a position of opposing Taurus. He's right in front of the ox here. Before his conversion, Saul was among the most bitter and relentless persecutors of the early church. Absolutely. He vehemently opposed him. Another meaning for this constellation is foolish. Now, that stumped me for a long time because I thought this was a good guy, and it means to be foolish. So can we tie that with Paul? Yes, we can. Twice, Paul referred to himself as a fool. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? So am I. Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool, I am more. So there you go, right there. And there's another reference in 2 Corinthians 12:11. Now he has this a sword right in the belt, hanging from the belt. There is a sword right here. Well, Saul was formerly entrusted with what? The sword of secular power. He was the agent of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish inquisitor, the exterminator of heretics. He also possessed the sword of the Spirit, the word of Elohim. So that's the double-edged sword. So either way, figuratively and or spiritually, yes, Paul possessed a mighty sword. Then we have the meaning of burly, right, which means strongly and heavily built. Okay, well, do we have a description of Paul? Yes, I think we do. In the book, The Acts of Paul and Thecla, which never made it into the New Testament, but was read widely in the developing early church, Paul is described by Titus as small in size, bald-headed, bow-legged, well-built, with eyebrows that met, rather long-nosed, and full of grace. What a description of our beloved Apostle Paul. So there you have a very likely possible description of Paul, which fits the meaning of the Hebrew word for Orion, Kasil, which is burly. And that's what burly means, well-built. And here Paul is being described as well-built. Interesting, it all connects. And then we have, now, the Egyptians had this as a, well, let's read this here. Orion is seen here holding the head of a lion in one hand and a mighty club in the other. His foot is on the river Eridanus, and on the head of Lepus, the hare. The Persians pictured Lepus as a serpent. Hanging from his belt is a great sword whose hilt well, now it's talking about Paul. Hanging from his belt is a great sword whose hilt is in the form of a lamb. And this is right here, the holder for the sword is the head of a lamb, which you can't really make out in this drawing. But the Persians had this as a serpent. Either way, a hare or a serpent, the meaning is to deceive, a deceiver. That's the meaning. So either way, if you want to have it as a rabbit, a hare, or a serpent, the meaning is the same. But I find that interesting that Paul did have contact with a literal serpent, didn't he? When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, there came a viper, the serpent, out of the heat, and it fastened on his hand, and he shook it off into the fire and felt no harm from it. Now, generally, you will see Orion with this head of a lion. However, over here, Orion was formerly represented with a shield of rawhide, then with the head of then with the head of a lion. According to universal Eastern tradition, Orion signified a lurking enemy or a hunter of men rather than a hunter of beasts. And of course, that's what Paul was, and he possessed the sword of secular power, right? And later the sword of Elohim, right? And so it makes sense that this is not a club. This is the sword that goes in his sheath right here, right? So it's the sword that he's wielding here. And along with the sword would be a shield. And that's what we have here, the shield of rawhide. And so according to universal Eastern tradition, Orion signified a lurking enemy or a hunter of men rather than of beasts. And that's what Paul was. He was a hunter of men, not a hunter of animals. He was a tent maker by trade, not a hunter of, of sorts. So Orion has generally been represented with his back turned toward us and face in profile, armed with a club or a sword, and protected by his shield. So there you go. There are the reasons why I believe that this is a description of Paul the Apostle. I can't think of anyone else that would better fit where we are in the story right here when the disciples are ready to go out and to plow the field. And right off the bat, who are they met by? They're met by Saul of Tarsus. It's kind of an interesting play on words there. You have Taurus, and Paul is from Tarsus. And when the disciples went out, I don't have this in my slides, but they traveled to the mountains, through the mountains of Taurus in Asia Minor there. There were the mountains of Taurus, actually. I should have put a slide on that. Oh, well, next time. Okay, moving forward.